Okay. So I'm here to talk about a very relevant and timely issue that is facing all of our students. And so I wanted to start off with a news clip here, get you thinking about it a little bit.
Fighting his nemesis atop the Megan Clock Tower. A new study by the Department of Education finds that students who think school is a boring waste of time score significantly lower on their standardized tests than their peers. Are these exams?
Absolutely, these kids are placed at an unfair disadvantage. You know, students who don't care enough to read through to the end of a word problem have an 89% lower chance of answering it correctly. I mean, there's something wrong with that question.
Yeah, you're right. And the studies also show that students who randomly fill in answer bubbles to make the UFC logo on their answer sheet score consistently worse than their peers.
How are the kids who don't care going to get ahead?
That's right.
Thank
You know,
you.
the deck is stacked against the child whose pencil breaks and he doesn't feel like getting up to go sharpen it, and so he just chooses fingernails.
And we need to discuss these kids on what they know, not what we want them to know.
But clearly this isn't just about the test, it's about the system as a whole. Should schools be doing more to reach out to students they don't care about?
Absolutely. There are no role models for these students in their textbooks. They just read about motivated people like George Washington and Frederick
What
Douglass.
about all the historical figures who didn't give a fuck about anything?
Yes, that's exactly
You
right.
never hear about that. Calvin Coolidge's brother Thomas hung around the White House for years before he finally died of alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, there's a larger issue at play here, which is that there's a big social stigma in this country against lazy, self-centered assholes. You know, these kids are suffering because of
You know,
it.
the purpose of school is to prepare our kids for the real world, and in the real world, people don't give a shit.
Companies have started professional programs specifically for students who don't care. Of course, we know Kinko's has been doing this for years. They hire thousands of students.
It's so great that they're reaching out to these kids. I don't care about anything when I was in school. You know, fortunately, I was very blessed to have a teacher that reached out to me and taught me the importance of pretending to give a shit about things. Without him, I certainly would never be the successful pundit that I am today.
Now, critics say the environment standardized tests are administered in. Nancy, who for that?
I ain't snitching.
Right, that's the issue we're here to talk about today, isn't it? No, actually, I think it's this one right here, from what I understand.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression, passed the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
So that's ostensibly, we can talk about either issue. I'm supposed to talk about the second one. We are going to talk about how to facilitate an effective classroom discussion today. And you're all sitting far too far apart to actually have an effective classroom discussion. Well, we will improvise here. So as Vicki said, I'm Dr. Matt Woppett. This is Dusty Fleener. I am the Associate Director of the Center on Disabilities and Human Development, and I also have adjunct appointments in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, and I've taught in the Core Discovery program for the past 5 years. So actually that program's no longer here. It's integrated seminars now. And Dusty has been my TA for 4 of those last, well, actually for all of those years, hasn't it? It's been all 5 years. So Dusty and I have worked together for a very long time, and that's why I brought him, because he knows more than I do. But I'm going to kick us off. Did you want to introduce?
Well, that was a good enough introduction for me.
All right, good enough. Sorry. I haven't lectured for like 3 weeks, and so I'm having like this, withdrawal thing, and I see a classroom and I have this ability to just go, All right, never mind. So we are going to talk about how to facilitate effective classroom discussion for the next 40 minutes, and we'll see where we get with that. What I want you to do, the very outset here, we're going to do just a very brief activity. I want you to think back to your many years of schooling, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't have many years of schooling. And I want you to think about a time that you were in a class, and it can be an undergrad class, a grad class, but a time you were in some class where there was a really engaging, a really, effective classroom discussion where you were in tune, you were engaged, you were learning, you felt like it was all working, right? And we all have these times, right, where we were in a class and we remember, oh, there was that great debate we had, or there was, whatever, and we felt really engaged together. So what I want you to do is think about that for just a second. So we're going to take about 30 seconds here, and I want you to think back and come up with an example. Yeah, 30 seconds of silence can seem like a long time, huh? Now what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody next to you, in front of you, behind you. It may entail getting up and moving because classroom discussion entails social interaction at some level. So you may have to be physically active. I want you to find somebody near to you, okay, and tell them about that experience. Just briefly, we'll take 2 minutes. And I want you to tell them about that experience. One of you say for 1 minute, and the other one gets another minute, and you kind of share those experiences, okay? So find somebody close to you, introduce yourself, and share your experience. So they'll do this. I'll have them share some of their experiences, the people who want to share out. And I'll point out a few things they just had a discussion. It's very easy, right? And then I'll turn it over to you. Okay?
I'll just run through my summary. How much time do you need for the end? So that would 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Yeah, if you can give me, 10, 15.
Okay.
Okay. I'm flexible though. I'm flexible.
But it was something, and it was just like,
Okay, you have about 30 seconds. Okay, are we done? Everybody had a chance to share? Maybe? Anybody want to tell me some of these experiences? You've had a chance to think about it, you've shared it. Anybody want to share with everybody? What's a time when you had a really effective, engaging classroom discussion? And what made it that way? Yes?
One, a wildlife major, and in my habitat ecology class, it was a pretty small class. It had like 12 people, each other.
Mhm.
And so usually those weekly discussions were really good because we all had a background and like then we had some new information to add into that background that we already had. So it was pretty engaging.
Great, and everybody came prepared and
Yeah.
kind of knew the format.
That makes the biggest difference when everybody comes prepared.
Right.
And if the seating is like this kind of seating is kind of bad for
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, this kind of seating is bad for a classroom discussion. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? There were groups that were laughing, so there's obviously some good stories out here somewhere. Yes.
Just to help you with the participation.
Thank you.
I recall I'm graduating the soil science class, and the concept of the law of the minimum came up, and the application of soil science. But I had one of those aha moments how that law was applicable to not just that principle we're studying, but in life in general. It's just one of those click moments that's going to hit that, this is beneficial other than just soil science.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was there something about how that discussion took place that helped it click for you, or?
Well, the professor was an old cowboy, interesting guy, quite a character, and just the way he presented, and that was just. And he again pulled in the life experience in his teaching.
Uh-huh.
And I think made a difference.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That ability to pull in real life experience, and that doesn't happen. Most professors don't do that well, but a discussion provides a format for, people to share different experiences, anecdotes, whatever that might make it click for you. Anybody else? This is called wait time. We'll talk about this later.
That's uncomfortable. Okay. Probably similar thing to the wildlife person who forestry class, dendrology. You go out and you got to figure out what you can do
Yeah.
with the trees and what laws and what the neighbors are going to say, and maybe the state. And so the professor did a good job of getting people together and you kind of have that argument out there in the unit that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So it was really good.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, moving outside the classroom and moving it into the community or wherever, where the classroom, especially classrooms like this, right, have a tendency to stifle classroom discussion, but if you can move it outside where people are more relaxed and there's not a certain set of social norms that you're supposed to adhere to, discussion may happen more naturally. So yeah, absolutely, changing the setting and the environment. I also like what you said at the beginning. Oh, that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for all your students. It's a great way to get people to talk. I'm going to talk about that later, but most professors wait only 3 seconds before they get too uncomfortable, or TAs or whoever, before they get too uncomfortable and they have to talk. And if you can wait, you can get people to contribute, because just like you said, it gets uncomfortable and people will say something, and then it quickly picks up after that. But ostensibly, you just had a classroom discussion, short and manufactured as it was. There was social interaction. You talked one with another. You probably met somebody you hadn't met. You shared out with the group, and we did it in about 7 minutes or so. Not too bad. So you did a good job. But it takes structuring the class around it, and it takes some particular skills. So what I want to do is I'm going to shut up, which will be shocking, and I'm going to turn the time over to Dusty, because Dusty is a master at facilitating classroom discussion. That's why I hang on to Dusty, and I want him to share some of his experiences and some of his tips in terms of how to do that effectively. So let me give you the mic, and maybe.
Do we make those awful shirt-moving mic sounds? Mute it.
Oh no, I didn't mute it. Whoops. See, you'll have to have us back next year.
Demand a do-over. Put this on the right way. Andrew, can you hear me okay up there? All right. You might want to cover your ears. Good morning, University of Idaho!
it's always good to start things off, get people's attention, grab a hold of it, or, at least have some sort of presence when you stand up in front of people and, make sure, hey, can you hear me in the back okay? Are you deafened? Good. Anyway, so we're looking at tools for facilitating discussion. One of them is being enthusiastic about what you're talking about, right? It doesn't do you any good to stand up in front of a classroom full of students who, one, don't give a crap, and two, if you're going to stand up there and play Ben Stein with a monotone voice, and today we're looking at chapter 5, and I want to know what your opinion on, whatever, Candide or, soil ecology, something. I mean, whatever topic is relevant to your discipline. That's not a discussion, because you're not getting them involved, you're turning them off. One of the great ways to facilitate discussion is to do what's called a cold opening. And anybody know what a cold opening is? No theater people in the room? Don't worry. I'm from the humanities. I'll cover it all. So cold opening is something as simple as finding a relevant YouTube clip. Having them listen to a 2-minute, 3-minute song that might be, the lyrics might have something relevant to what you're talking about. You have to forgive me, I'm not a sciences person, so I would not know what you could possibly show them out of the sciences for media, but I'm sure there's stuff from Big Bang Theory, there's other things that the kids are watching today that you can take complete advantage of that might tie in with a lecture, might tie in with a project, it might even be criticism of something that you're talking about, or offer an opposing side to what students might be bringing to the table from a previous class discussion. But utilize your YouTube, utilize the DVD in a movie, utilize your music. It's a great way to break the ice. It's a great way to start discussion. It's a great way to kind of like prime their minds to begin thinking about, oh, we're going to be talking about this stuff, right? Gets them centered. It gets them, to call up the information. It also challenges them to do the reading, right? As was mentioned before, it helps when people come to class to be prepared. And when you're going to engage them in discussion, and they've got that, oh, they might talk to me today. Oh, we might break into groups. Oh, this might be important. I'd better read this, right? It kind of raises that expectation level. It challenges them to become better students, to participate, even if they might not, care that much. But, ask a thought-provoking question. Allow 5 minutes to free write. That's another great tactic. You could just start off the class. This works really well for people doing literature classes. It also works for people who are doing things like bioethics. You have a question out of the news for the day, or you have a question that's popular with this particular field that you might be in, and just to have them, engage with it. Don't make it graded or anything like that. I mean, you do that, that's too much pressure. But just give them 5 minutes, because there are different learning types, as I'm sure you've probably already learned. I don't know, did you have Terry come in? Yeah. So you're aware that people learn in different styles, right? You have the kinetic learners, kinesthetic. I didn't listen too well apparently. But you have audio-visual, you have tactile learning, right? You've got people who will do better if you just stand up and pontificate. You have other people who do better if you walk over, write something on the board. But with discussion, right, it could be a blend of all these things. And so in taking 5 minutes to have them sit down, write something out, it allows the people who think slower, who are more shy, to kind of create an outline for themselves, engage with the topic, especially if it's like a hot discussion topic. If you're a sociologist, you want to talk about something big, that people get their egos wrapped up in. It helps them separate themselves from the idea. It gives people a chance to say, okay, these are my points, and then you have set points that you can talk about. Provide a personal story and lived experience. Matt brought this up, and you participated in this, right? Think about something you have experienced. And not just in the discussion group, because that works really well, but when you're standing up in front of classroom people, and they're not really understanding what kind of a lived experience you're talking about, or what kind of an idea that you're trying to get across to them, it works great to say, here's this topic, here's what we're talking about today, but I want to lead off and tell you a little story. Or I want to say, this is something that happened to me when I was in your place and engaging with this topic. These are the type of things that we were talking about before. When I took this class, or when I was at this other school, wherever you come from. I'm sure we've all come from different areas of the United States. Some of us might be local. Some of us might just be stepping into college for the first time after a long absence. Who knows, right? So you need to figure out ways to start building bonds with the students, making connections and getting them engaged, not just with the course material, but with you too. Because they need to understand that you're a co-participant in the classroom, right? And it was mentioned before that this kind of arrangement we have here, this is non-conducive to group discussion, because here we are having a one-way conversation, ostensibly, right? Because people in the audience will talk to the instructor. The instructor, if they're a good instructor, will repeat, clarify, follow up, and project it out to the rest of the audience, because people kind of remove from each other at two ends of the room, or front to back. But it's doable, right? Well, Matt said we can force it, we kind of make it work. You kind of work with whatever the university will assign you. Optimally, set yourself up. It said that you sit around the table. It was out here, right, ma'am? You said that, right? Sitting around a table facing each other. That's the best way you're going to have a discussion. You're going to have a discussion. Be face to face, right? Create a circle of equals. right? Take the time to sit down and acknowledge that this isn't a one-way conversation between one student and the instructor. This is between the entire classroom of different individuals with different sets of cultural baggage, with different backgrounds, and they all have different opinions. Now, some of them might line up, but I mean, you know, you're going to run into some things, especially if you're in sciences or humanities, that there's going to be people who are going to butt heads. Again, this is tying into the ego thing, but we'll get to that, like right now. The best way to diffuse some of those hot tension issues is to use the Ben Franklin argument. You know, or like the way that Ben Franklin would make arguments is he would do his best to disentangle ideas, right? So if you're going to be talking about sociology classes, I'm going to pick on them because they're fresh in my mind. You know, if you're going to talk about abortion, if you're going to talk about gun control, if you're going to talk about some things that people get really passionate about, really tied up in, you know, it works best to create the third-party system, right? Ben Franklin would say things like, you know, I once heard someone say that this, you know, some might say, right, you remove yourself being the opposition force, being the instructor, right, or being a co-participant in the discussion, right? You create this you know, mythical third party that doesn't really sit in the classroom with you, but you can play devil's advocate through them, because then you're not taking ownership as a discussion leader over those ideas that people might be coming into, you know, odds with. And it's really hard too, because you're going to be stuck with the classroom, you know, for maybe, I don't know, 3 days a week or 2 days a week for an hour 15 minutes on both of those days, where you might get into a discussion and you're going to feel really isolated up there because, you know, maybe the students aren't committing, maybe they're really uncomfortable with talking about certain issues, and you have to step it up. And that's okay, that's your role. You have to be the person who's going to be uncomfortable with those 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute silences. And you got to be okay with that, because one, people are actually out there, they're thinking on what you've been saying, they're thinking on what they read, they think about what other students are saying. And you've got to be comfortable. You've got to be the strong, charismatic person to stand up in the front of the room, because, you know, they've got this fog of education, right? They assume that you're standing up in the front of the room pontificating and, you know, saying all these great things about, you know, your course or your books or your department. I mean, they've got this idea, though, that you know what you're doing. And that's okay. You got to have confidence. You got to believe in yourself when you're leading these discussions, because it's okay for you to set rules, to enforce them, and more importantly, to encourage people to just, it's okay. You know, we can have silence. Be comfortable with the silence, because people will think on this. People will dwell on this. People will interact with each other as best as they can. And the best part about classrooms is they begin to develop these personalities. You will be able to pick out that, okay, this is a struggling point. You know, this exercise, you know, the 5-minute think and free write, you know, the pair and share ideas, you know, the cold openings of some of the media, yeah, that might not work with everybody. You just kind of have to custom tailor and be flexible. You know, figure out what works best for your students, for your discipline, that kind of thing. Any questions so far? I know I've scared them all. It's okay, I'll give you more time for Q&A. But, you know, Matt did this already, and it was following up and clarifying with student ideas and comments. That's a great way, not only to, you know, kind of give positive feedback and, you know, encouragement to students who want to participate in the discussion, but also to, you know, kind of, especially if they have a problem trying to create an idea or explain their idea and give it the good dialogue and substance that other people who might be more comfortable talking with groups would have. So, I mean, it's good that you listen to what they say, you pair it back, is this what you're saying, you know, confirm it, and then, you know, give them some sort of acknowledgement that yes, this is a good track that we should pursue, or help them refine what they're getting at. Like, there's no problem with engaging with the students. It's okay. I mean, you know, the discussion includes you too. I'm not saying you just have to let the students take everything over. It's nice sometimes that the students feel confident enough that you just sit there and listen to an amazing discussion unfold around you. But a lot of times you got to work with it, especially if you're going to be teaching freshmen. You know, 'cause, you know, they're scared, it's a new place, they don't really fit in, or they might not feeling like they're fitting in. They've got a load of things they're thinking about, you know, the dance on Friday, or, I don't know, anything that young students have to do. We won't talk about that stuff, right? You know, you can break the class into smaller groups, right? Make them take ownership of the classroom by starting small, right? Because it's not the sage on the stage idea, right? They didn't come just to listen to you, right? They came to have the full-on University of Idaho classroom experience in engaging and grappling with ideas and encountering new ideas that makes them uncomfortable. And when you make them uncomfortable, right? This is something that Matt taught me here. When you make students uncomfortable, they're thinking. And encouraging them to sit down into smaller scale, right? The big classroom is intimidating, but like 2 or 3 people, well, that's okay. I can manage 2 or 3 people, right? Because then it's not a whole classroom listening to me. It's just 2 or 3 people, right? Make things more compartmentalized. Make it easier to access to begin with, and then see if you can stretch it out. See if you can expand. You know, and be okay with the silence. Again, I got to bring that up because, you know, we all felt a little awkward with the silences at one point or another, right? Because you're like, oh, this is a lot of pressure. This is really uncomfortable. But be okay with that because people are thinking. Then we talked about being flexible and being open to having different groups of personalities in your classroom. With being flexible, that also puts a lot about not just engaging while you're physically in the classroom, but ahead of time too. Like, you should take the time to look at your material. If you're going to be leading a discussion, if it's a literature book, read through the book, know what you want to talk about for that day. We're going to be talking about character development chapters 1 through 3. We're going to be talking about a topic in bioethics. Study up on that. Read some other articles outside the one that you've assigned. Bring in all this outside material. Make connections from the classroom out into the real world. Make connections from one discipline into another discipline if possible. Be flexible not just within the discussion group, but with your own learning. In addition to being flexible within your own learning, always remember those 5 Ps, right? Everybody know the 5 Ps? Right? Prior, planning, prevents, poor, performance. Right? Always have a backup plan. Always have some kind of seed questions, or always have something with you that you can fall back on. If people are having problems talking about a particular issue, give them some seed questions, give them some seed debate, pull out that Ben Franklin stuff. Some people say this and some people say that. Where do you think you fall? And why? That's the great thing about students, though, is that they don't realize that they can come to the classroom for a discussion and they're like, oh, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. They know. It's in there. Like, they've come pre-primed from a previous college or high school experience or their own lived experience or their parents or their own background culture, wherever they're from. They will come with, armed with these opinions about what they think they know. And they'll share them. You just kind of have to tease it out of them. I'm probably making it sound much worse than it actually is, or better. I'm not sure. Any questions so far before I turn it back over to Matt, though? Gave you a little chance to think about things, make fun of my pants or hat. It also helps to be self-deprecating, right? Because it's disarming. The big thing that a lot of people have problems with discussion is that, again, it's that oppositional force. Defeat that. Take the oppositional force away. Yes, you need to have oppositional force to have discussion. But when you're the facilitator, right, you're the one who's trying to encourage this sort of discourse to occur. You need to disarm yourself. And that's okay. I'm not saying completely rob yourself of authority in the classroom, because then we'll have chaos and it'll be like a scene out of South Park. It won't work. You just don't panic. That's also right. That's one of the most important rules, I think, right? Besides the answer to everything, which is 42. I mean, you don't panic. Don't panic. Always have a towel. You can forget the towel here at U of I. It's too cold for towels. But I mean, always have your plan. Always have your backup. But disarm yourself. Right? Don't be the confrontational teacher. Don't, oh, well, so-and-so had a terrible idea back there. Oh, yeah, that's pretty good. You're obviously not from around here, kid. I mean, don't be the bad guy. I'm not going to say be the hero, the cheerleader, the morale-boosting commissar either, right? Because that's not what we're going for. But you want to encourage them to take a stand and feel comfortable, right? That's the most important thing. Feel comfortable in a safe environment to talk about these things academically. Whether they're humanities, sciences, social sciences, any of the spectrum. This should work across the board. You just have to customize and tailor it to wherever you're from and what you're teaching. So it's not going to be easy. I doubt you're going to have that much discussion problems with some of your courses, but it's out there. I think I've bored them long enough. Back to you, boss.
They'll get mad at me. Sorry, technology. Not to. On? Is that on? Okay, sorry. Sorry, it's supposed to be a lot smoother than this. And now I've got this thing hanging. Oh, man. Get away. Let me tell you about the greatest classroom discussion I ever had. I taught a class here in the core discovery program called What is Normal? And it's a year-long exploration of where the concept of normality came from. And so we looked at issues of bioethics and we looked at statistics. It was a highly interdisciplinary course. And one of the issues that we ended up looking at very closely was this notion of genetic testing and genetic engineering. And most people don't realize that in the United States and Great Britain, that about 93% of children, of fetuses who are tested and are identified as having Down syndrome are aborted. And this is as a result of our wonderful technology that we've developed. The Lancet, which is the British equivalent of the the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, reported these results, and they've been corroborated in the US as well. So we have women who get pregnant, they go and they get genetic testing, they find out their child has Down syndrome or something, 93% are terminated. And I said, okay, we're going to debate this. Is genetic testing a good thing? Right? And so we divide the class into two sides, and what I do is I divide it right down the middle. I don't care where you fall on this issue. I'm going to make you take a perspective. And it may not be the perspective you agree with, but you need to research that, you need to come prepared, and you need to defend your side of the argument. It's very much, it's called the jurisprudential model of inquiry, where they have to take a perspective, they have to be prepared, and then they have to debate and defend that perspective, whether they believe it or not. And we came to class the day of the debate, and everybody was really anxious. We'd spent a week preparing for this, and it ended up being this all-out fight. People crying, and I mean, there were people walking out of the classroom. It was terrible. It was a disaster. But it was the most memorable classroom discussion they had. And so I didn't leave it at that, right? You don't say, okay, you're just a wuss, you can't handle, right? You can't handle confrontation. They come back, and we spent the next week really debriefing about this discussion. What was it that made you uncomfortable? What was it that you didn't believe in? What was it that made you walk outside the room? And that class really opened up in a way. These are freshmen. And they have terminal coolness, right? They would die of their coolness, right, if they could. And so, getting them to open up and actually talk about, really meaty issues is hard. But something like that where they saw emotion, where they saw how each other felt about it, really provided this context for them to engage and to see the other person. And to say they have valuable insights too. They have different insights, but they're valuable, and they feel just as strongly about what they believe as I do about what I believe. And that becomes a really important component of classroom discussion, getting emotion involved in it. And as Dusty pointed out earlier, a lot of this has to do with how we structure the classroom space. So whether it's moving outside of a traditional classroom like this, right? This classroom here says that you pay attention to me, and it doesn't matter who else is out there. And sometimes it takes some creativity, but you can physically arrange a classroom in a way that discussion will happen naturally. You won't even have to really prepare for it. Like Dusty said, if you can sit around a table, or if you can arrange chairs in a circle, or if you can, go sit on couches and sit on the floor or whatever, where people are more comfortable and relaxed, you will have a hard time stopping discussion as opposed to it. So the trick becomes, in these classrooms, how do you do it? And in these classrooms, you can't. So, no. No, we did it earlier, right? It just takes a little more planning and preparation to get those pieces in place and to get people, you have to get people up and moving around. Discussion doesn't happen if you're just sitting right there. You have to move around. You have to turn at least to the side and find someone to talk to. And if you can't get students to do that, well, I don't know. I don't think I can help you. You can get students to do that. It's very easy. I got you to do it. You don't even know me. You have no connection to me whatsoever. But I got you to do it. You can get your students to do it as well. What I have here is I have a handout of kind of some tips that I use. And I don't know how the best way to pass these out is because you're all so disparate to the far winds. I'll start some here and I'll start some over here, and you're going to have to get up and move around probably. Or do you want to help? Maybe you can help cycle them through. There are two sides to this. One is the boring stuff that I could talk to you about that I won't, that you can read and get just as these are kind of the key things that I think are important to facilitating a classroom discussion. And what I want to do is touch on the first and the last ones before I end here and give you a chance to ask a few questions. On the back is from some research that was done last year. They did some surveys of college students, and they asked, and they kind of had students write down what are the most, very similar to what I did, what's the most effective discussion techniques you've seen in classes? And they kind of categorized them into 6 themes here. And that's what's on the back. And I want to talk about the first one there before I end. But in terms of going back and revisiting what Dusty said, the best way to facilitate classroom discussion is to let students know that you're approachable. And whether that's through humor, whether that's through, self-deprecation, making fun of pants, pocket protectors, whatever you wear, whatever you are, that's another way. But students, when they see that you are approachable, that you're not this uptight academic, are more willing to actually engage. And sometimes that takes effort, but when they understand that you are not there to teach them that they're wrong, when you're actually an equal, when you say, I'm here to learn from you as well. Because especially, I don't know which level you're going to be working with, but especially with older undergraduate students and graduate students, in many cases, they're bringing as much knowledge to the classroom as any of us have. And it's important to acknowledge that and to let them know that, yeah, you have the title, you have the job, but also they bring experience, insights, and other things to the classroom that will inform and help the group also grow. So be approachable. Be approachable. Students are intimidated. Don't be intimidating. Finally, be fair. Be fair. One thing that kills classroom discussion, and you all know this, you have like 1 or 2 people in the class who just want to talk the whole time. They have every opinion in the world and they will not shut up. You have names for them. I won't share some of those names for them. I know who they are. You know who they are. That kills classroom discussion quicker than anything. These opinionated people who like to talk too much. So be fair. And there's many ways to do this, whether it's cold calling, which is different than the cold opening, where you're just calling on people randomly, and people come, and what this does is if you're calling on people randomly, they're forced to come prepared, right? Because they don't know if they're going to be called on that day. And if it becomes a practice right up front that you may be called on to provide an opinion, an insight, an answer, they're all going to be, it kind of raises the stakes a little bit, as it were. And there's many ways to do this cold calling. I have dice rolls there. Every student, you're all sitting in a chair that has a number on it, right? You can get 2 dice, and I guess for 9s and stuff you can't. You can get 4 dice, 9 dice. In these bigger classrooms, dice, you have to get 20-sided dice for larger classrooms, right? You have to be a D&D player. Bring your 20-sided dice and it's all good. But using dice rolls to decide who answers becomes a very fair way, and students really find that fun because, right, there's always anticipation. It's right, you're tapping into that little gambler inside of all of them. Is it going to be me? Is it going to be me? Right? And you'll actually get students taking odds on that. So who will get called on the most? The other one is name cards, where you have a deck of cards with everyone's name on it, and you're just pulling them out at random. And again, especially with a big class, that becomes a very effective way for you to learn people's names, but also for you to be fair in how you're calling on people throughout the classroom. But again, it takes some creativity, it takes some preparation on your part. Finally, on the student tips, the very first one there, which is something that I've done for years, making discussion and classroom participation a significant graded portion of the class. A lot of people assume discussion is just going to happen, and it doesn't. What you need to do is make it a graded portion of the class, and if students realize that participating and talking is part of what they're graded on, you will find that they will engage, and especially if they know that you're keeping track of it. If you're keeping track of who's talking and who is engaging and who is sharing their ideas, everybody will step up. And it takes some time, but that portion, that over and over and over on student surveys, we see that graded, required classroom participation is probably the best way, bar none, to get students engaged. I know it becomes a little bit, I don't know, heavy-handed, I guess, but it's in most of my classes, it makes up about 20% of a student's grade. So, if they choose not to come and they choose not to participate, the best they can do is a C in the class, really, a low B, a C, whatever. And what that does is they're engaged, they're prepared, they're there, and they're participating almost every day. So, I have about 2 minutes. I have now bored you with, we started off with a good example. We have now ended with a terribly bad example of how to facilitate classroom discussion. But you will learn that with only 45 to 50 minutes in a class period, there's not a whole lot of choice sometimes. So do you guys have any questions, concerns? Yes?
How would you keep track of participation in a large class like that?
Well, that's where getting them to sit in like numbered seats or something where you have a seating chart and you just X off where they're sitting, or you have a TA. I don't know if you guys are all going to be TAs, I guess. So that might be your job, right? That's right. How are you going? Right? If the professor's lecturing and you're the TA or whatever, you keep track. You know, if you're, a huge lecture hall becomes kind of tricky. But if you have them share their name, if you just have a role, say when you talk, can you tell us your name? And then you just exit off, you know, say this person's participated, this person's participated. Graded participation becomes trickier in big classes because unless you have a really long class, you can't get everybody to talk in each class period. So you have to figure out a way to balance that. Some of that comes in small group work, like Dusty said, where everyone's required to participate and you go around and just look at these small groups and say, is everybody here engaging, participating, talking? You know. That's one way. So, other questions or concerns?
So do you guys do the good cop, bad cop kind of thing?
Yes, always. No. I'm yes, we do that frequently. Yeah, they're always happy when Dusty gets to take the class and I'm gone. But yeah, no, it's the good cop, bad cop thing works well for us. And I actually find that, and you may find this when you're a TA and you're not the professor, they're more willing to talk. I find that with Dusty, which is a lot of times why I like to put him up there, because the students open up. This is a fellow student. I can talk to him. And again, maybe that, and again, that's kind of against my first thing, right? There, be approachable. I try. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. It takes time. It takes practice. Discussion is not something that comes naturally in large lecture halls like this. So you just have to figure out what works and go with it. I was going to share one last thing, and I'm going to share one last thing. I have time, right? Can I take just 1 second? One thing that I have found, and again, this is a good way to encourage classroom participation too, is to share personal experiences. One thing that I have found that's really engaging to my students, and it's one of the tips that I have on here, is to not insert myself in anything that I talk about or teach. And my students always want to know, because I do a lot with ethical issues and really kind of meaty, highly debatable things, whether it's policy or bioethics or ethics in general, how we treat each other. These are all issues that I teach about. And students always say, well, what do you believe? And I say, I'm not going to tell you. My job is not to influence what you think, right? And again, it's the difference, I guess, within the humanities and the social sciences, where I can withhold myself and they don't feel like I'm looking for a right answer. I don't want them, and I do that because I don't want them telling me what I believe. I want them to feel like, you know, I'm not going to insert myself in here. And whether they feel like they need to guess what I believe and tailor it to what I believe, or whether they feel like they want to inform my belief or whatever, I don't insert myself into it at all. And I tell them, on the last day of class, I will sit down and I set aside the whole last day of class, and so you need to keep track through the semester of what questions you want me to answer. And at the last day of class, we'll take the whole class period, and you can ask me anything you want. And I will tell you what I believe on all of these issues. And that's really motivating to them, because they're writing stuff down. Oh, I wonder what he believes about this, and I wonder what he believes about that. And they're engaged. And at the same time, so the last day of class, there's more discussion usually than we have time for, because they all want to know all sorts of things. But it keeps me out of it. And when you keep yourself out of it, and you're not a co-debater with them, when you're more of a facilitator and a discussion leader, that is a huge issue. It's a skill, I think, that takes time to learn. I wasn't always good at it. It wasn't until I taught for about 7 years that I really figured out that was an important component to getting students to participate. But it's become a very effective way, and it's one of the things on here. I think it's the third: be a discussion leader, not a discussant or a debater. Your job's to facilitate, not to tell them what to believe or not to believe. So, anyway, other questions or concerns? Otherwise, I will shut up. Okay. Well, thank you.
This is a highly interactive